Good morning, my magnificent friends. Welcome back to Tea with Sue. I'm so delighted it's Friday again, and I get to share some time with you. So I'm all ready here. I have my world's best Nana mug for my tea. I spent a delightful couple of hours yesterday with my twin granddaughters, who are 2.5. Well, they're like mini white tornadoes, and we had such fun. I laughed and giggled and ran with them, and I felt like a kid again. So I'm all filled with great joy this morning. I mulled over earlier in the week. So what am I going to talk about on Friday? And as always happens when I turn my attention to what's on my mind and what I want to share, it came to me. So today I want to talk about expectations. So I Googled the definition, and an expectation is a strong belief of some outcome in the future. Now, that could be something very, very positive, or it could be something negative. So it depends on what the belief is. So if I have, for example, a strong belief that the world is a friendly place and I have some power in it, and that belief turns into this, well, I expect good things to happen to me then, and good things do happen, then that confirms that belief, and then my expectation becomes stronger as a result. Now, what happens if things go on in life that are not that good, and the world isn't as friendly a place as what I thought? Well, I guess it depends how deep-seated the original belief was, because if it's really deep-seated, then shaking that expectation is, and shaking that belief is not that easy. So I might then make exceptions and say, well, life doesn't always bring me the best that I think I want, but, and it maybe isn't always friendly because there was that person over there who was mean to me or whatever, but I make exceptions and I say, oh, well, that's okay. For the most part, the world is a friendly place. And because I've tested out my own power in it, and I've reinforced through my actions or choices or whatever I have, that I can trust in that power, then of course the belief gets seated now. Oh yeah, I have some power. I can do this. So many years ago, I taught spoon bending a spoon with your mind in a personal growth program. And initially my belief was I couldn't do it. And I expected that I would fail every time, which of course I did. And then as I explored this belief and the resulting expectation, and began to wonder about what is it that's stopping me from doing this. And when I hit on what was stopping me from doing it, then my ability to mentally bend a spoon happened. And because I did it over and over and over again, now I expect that if I choose to bend a spoon, I can, because I proved it to myself, and life is good. So that gives you some idea of expectations. Now, there's expectations can cause us to suffer, however. And let me just share a variety of ways that can happen. So certainly we have expectations of ourselves as we grow up and learn things. Then we have an expectation of whether we can do it or can't do it. So for example, learning to tie your shoes. Well, initially, because you fail over and over and over and over again, you have this expectation, oh, mom wants me to tie my shoes again and I'm no good at it and I can't do it. And then at some point through the practice or being shown a different way or however that all works, magic happens and you tie your shoes. And so maybe the expectation is, well, mostly I can't tie my shoes, but there was that one time that I tied my shoe. Oh, okay. Well, maybe I'll get lucky and I'll be able to tie it again. And then you succeed again. And then pretty soon you succeed so many more times, then it overrides that negative expectation. Oh, I can't tie my shoes. I'm no good at that. I was that way with backing up. And I consider myself to be a pretty decent driver. Backing up for me was scary because I was never quite sure that I could see properly. So I'm cranking my head around and trying to use my mirrors, but not feeling very confident. So we lived in a house that had a garage at the back of the house. So there's this long driveway. And so I would pull in forward, but I was forced to back up. And my husband said, well, Sue, why don't you just back in? And I'm going, oh no, what if I hit the side of the garage? I can't do that. So I avoided backing up whenever possible and convinced myself. I had these negative expectations. All right, so you're not going to be able to do this, and you're not going to do it well. And there was all this fear and resistance, and I was mad at myself because I couldn't actually do this, and there didn't seem to be any really good reason why I couldn't. And so I would just make an excuse and just not do it when I didn't have to. So now I'm in an apartment where in the parking garage, it's way more, um, it's much easier if I back in so that I can pull out because there's a pillar right next to me. And after a day or two of trying to go in front ways, that wasn't working that well. And then I was even more worried about backing out and all the cars in behind me, that I thought, okay, Sue, I guess it's time you learn how to back up and get into your parking spot. Well, I'm pretty tickled with myself because now I can back into my parking spot, and I've changed my expectations about that. Now I expect myself to be able to do it. And sometimes I can do it in one try where I just back in and there I am. Other times I start backing in and then I correct and and sometimes it takes me 6 times to get in backwards, but I do it. And so I didn't move to expecting that I'm going to back into my parking spot perfectly every time. I just know that I expect, because I've been able to do it now, that I trust myself to be able to do that. So we have these expectations of ourselves, right? And so where does that get us into trouble? It gets us into trouble when we have an expectation that turns out to be untrue. So there were people in my family who believed that if you went to college and got a degree, that guaranteed you a good job. And so the push was on to go to college. Now, and I bet there's a bunch of you out there got that same expectation from your parents. We expect you to go to college because that's how you're going to get a good job. And for many parents, there's no ands, ifs, or buts about it. That's just the way the world works in their eyes. But how many people do you know, as I know, who went to college or university, got their degree, came out with massive debt, and are working in a coffee shop? It did not guarantee them even a good minimum wage job, never mind a dream job or even a quotes good job where they could make a good living. So now what happens then inside us when we realize that that there was that strong belief that did not pan out, well, then we might feel resentment of our parents for pushing us into that. We might feel some less than, some shame, some guilt. Well, what's wrong with me? I know so and so, and they got their dream job by going to university. How come I can't? So, and it sets up this fear of the future, this expectation that, well, if that didn't turn out well, and I worked really hard and I got good marks and I did all those things that they said, well, it sets up a victimization that doesn't serve us very well. And so I think it's important that we start examining our expectations and saying, is that true? Is what I believe really true? Or do I need to think that through again? What is the best I can expect? Of course, with expectations, because of learned behavior and pattern behavior and consistency, and maybe some constancy in a particular arena, we think, oh, well, that's the way it's always going to be. We've always done it that way. You see this in companies. Well, we're not going to change. We've always done it that way. So, I mean, up to 2 years ago, I was very used to being out in front of a live audience because that's the way I got my information across, whether I was in front of a classroom or on stage somewhere. And that was how I did business. Well, then our pandemic hits and I'm not doing business that way at all yet. So I had to make a huge shift in that. So life throws us these curveballs. Well, if we're too wrapped up in our expectations, well, that's not the way the world's supposed to go, then we get blindsided, we get shocked, and we're going, well, now what? And we look for somebody to blame, and we want to rail at, well, they should know better, or that shouldn't be happening, or who's at fault here, and judgment sets in like bam. So we've already talked about judgment in a previous episode, and you go, okay, this is not so good. So we want to. So I guess if we're going to have an expectation, one of the expectations is to expect the unexpected. That just when we think we have it all figured out, something different will come along to cause us to look at things differently. Now, we can still ignore it. That's our choice, right? We have free will. But it's interesting how life has a way of saying, no, Sue, I think you really better take a look at this now. Now, don't quit avoiding that. And so then I'm forced. So we have these challenges with expectations of ourselves. What if the expectation, and of course, we look for an antidote, right? And say, oh, if this is causing me to suffer, if my expectations are causing me to suffer, well, what's the antidote? What am I going to do to move through this with more peace, more joy, more love? Well, of course, one of the antidotes is to just affirm that in any given moment, you are doing the best you can. With what you know at this moment in time, you're doing the best you can. And that's good enough. Then the pressure comes off. And we don't, people I find who are perfectionists, I'm a perfectionist about some things, but not very many things. I like to just say, well, okay, that's, in this situation, that's good enough. It doesn't have to be, because I'm not a great believer that anything is ever perfect anyway. And so excellence, now that's worth striving for, but perfection in whose eyes? That's a judgment, right? And so I do my best to avoid the notion of perfection unless I label it as that's perfect in the moment. A friend agreed to call me later and I said, perfect. because that's what will suit, is whenever she calls, it'll be perfect. So, so that's about self expectations and how we and we pick those up from other people. Now, what about expectations in relation to others? What we expect of them and what they expect of us. Oh boy, this is where the waters get murky. So, have a sip of tea and take a breath. We all have ideas about what we want from other people. And the thing is, we all want to be loved, right? We all want to feel cherished, cared for, looked after, and so on. And by the same token, because we value all of those things and the ways that we're looked after, then for the most part, we want to return the favor, right? We want to cherish other people and love them and serve them and protect them and all of those kinds of things. Well, that's a pretty cool world to imagine that all of us have those same values, that we cherish what it's like to feel love and to give love. So a worthy goal, right? But the challenge comes in when, even though we deserve that love, we come to accept it as our total right, and nobody better mess with that. I have a right to be loved, and therefore people better love me. And when some don't, we're shocked. Wow, what's wrong with them? Why didn't they do what I asked, or give me this, or provide me that, or whatever? And then the resentment sets in, and then we spiral down into that place that we label suffering and say, oh, well, that didn't work. Well, what was it about that triggered that downward spiral? Well, if you examine it, you can pretty well be assured that fear is in there somewhere. Maybe we learned growing up that we needed to do something to be worthy of that love, that there was an expectation from our parents. Well, if you're good and you do what we tell you to do, we will love you. So it's a conditional kind of love, when what we most want is unconditional love. Will you just love me for me, quirks, foibles, warts, and all, or not? And I think most of us on planet Earth don't really understand what unconditional love is, because we haven't exactly experienced it. There always seems to be some conditions attached. Well, if you get good grades, I'm going to be proud of you. Well, if you take out the trash, then you're in my good books, etc., etc. Well, the flip side of that, if you don't get good grades, I'm going to be disappointed, and you don't want to disappoint your mother. Or, oh, you didn't take out the trash. Well, you're not a good son or daughter, because I wanted you to do that and you didn't do it. So inside us builds the guilt and the shame, and depending on the severity of the infraction or whatever it is that caused disapproval or disappointment or whatever, anger, there's all kinds of things. So then we're so in order to be loved, it's important that I do things to measure up. Well, I don't know about you, but I have spent far too many years believing that I needed to do something to measure up. So let me give you a quick example. When I grew up in in a fairly relaxed but understanding from a religious perspective. I grew up in kind of a Christian focus, and the idea was that if you do good things, God will grant you a good life. And that was a very simplified version of what belief was kind of planted in my brain. And so at one point, and so when I stepped out of line and I suffered, then and I got back into line, I had this little internal pact with God. Okay, I'll be good. I'll be as good as I can possibly be, and you will give me a good life. So there was my expectation, right? Now I figured I'd made a deal with God. And when I was 17, my mom died suddenly. And I'm beyond shocked. I'm traumatized. And not only because of the loss of her, but because I had a deal with God. And as far as I was concerned, he broke the deal. I trusted him to give me a good life, and he took my mother away. I was angry. But of course, I was a kid. And so I wasn't too sure that I was allowed to be angry with God, because, well, that wasn't in the Bible, as far as I knew. That no, you can't argue and mess with God. That would be bad. So I spent lots of years working to resolve that, and there was a part of me that, even though I was still mad at him, I thought, well, if I just measure up a little more, if I take this course, or I do this thing, or I do nice things for people, then maybe he'll honor me with a better life. And it wasn't until I was in my 50s and I had this near-death experience that I understood that I had it all wrong. that wasn't how it worked at all. That I was loved because I existed, because I was God's child, just as everybody is loved unconditionally, total acceptance. Didn't matter what I had done or not done, the love was there. And I'm going, really? You mean I didn't have to do all that stuff? And the knowing was, well, no, it's great that you did, because it had meaning for you, and it contributed to the world in some way, and to other people in some way. But we love you anyway. Your place at the table is guaranteed, and your name is there. You just have to pull out the chair and sit down. So that was a different perspective, and I realized that none of my expectations were true, and the belief that I had shifted dramatically. And that's when I came to understand, oh, so that's why I feel now that we're born magnificent, because we are. we come into this plane of existence totally magnificent, and then because we want to have an experience, we bring in contrast, we bring in different ways of being, different ways of doing, we experiment, we try things on, we go down paths that in hindsight we go, and why did I do that? And so on. So now my expectation in relation to God has shifted, certainly, because my expectation is to have this loving relationship, which we do, and I know he, she, it, source, whatever, has my back, and that's a given. So it has shifted the way that I deal, not only internally, but that I deal outwardly as well. So in relation to other people, I find that I don't have the same expectations that I used to have. And as a result, so let me give you a really easy example. A number of years ago, when I was partnered with my second husband, he had a habit. So you can love one another dearly, but each of us has our own ways of doing things around the house. We have habits. And so one of his habits was to always make sure that the dresser drawers in any room were always shut, that doors were properly closed and drawers were properly closed. And that was his thing. I didn't know that. Mine was when I was finished in the bathroom in the morning, I'd wipe up around the sink so that things were tidy. Well, we came to discover that because I didn't care about whether, if I opened a drawer and I mostly closed it but wasn't totally shut, it didn't bother me, but it bothered him. It really irritated him. On my perspective, when he went into the bathroom before me and he's washing and shaving and so on, I come in later, I'm dressed, ready to put my makeup on, and there's water around the sink. And if I get too close, I've got water on my clothes. And I'm going, oh man, I wish he wouldn't do that. And of course he's thinking, I wish he would do this for me. So one day, because we were on a growth path and we wanted this relationship to work, and we were really paying attention to one another in that regard. And so we talked about this, and in as non-threatening a way as he could, he told me about this preference of his to have these drawers closed. And so and would I make an effort to do that for him? And on the other side, I did the same thing. I said, well, okay. And it really bugs me when, and we talked about the mess around the sink. So now, did we make a pact that we would always do that? No, we didn't set up that expectation. I didn't say, I promise you, I'm always going to shut the dresser drawers tight. I said, I will do my best to keep the drawers properly closed so that you're happy. And he in turn said to me, I will do my best. So we made that agreement. And then, of course, I know we're watching each other without really saying anything. And for the most part, I kept the dresser drawers properly shut. And for the most part, he cleaned up around the sink. Now, was there the odd occasion that neither of us did what we committed to do? Yes, absolutely. But because it was a one-off, here and there, it didn't matter. And so that never was an issue for the rest of the time that we were married. We resolved that, and it was simply because we didn't establish, wild expectations. I promise you, I'm always going to da 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 da. We just said, I'm going to do my best, and that solved it. So I think when we look at expectations for ourselves and other people, it's a whole lot easier if we just determine in any given moment, I am doing my best and I'm committed to doing my best, as I believe everyone else is. And if something goes awry, then let's talk. Let's clear up the expectations, because there's lots of expectations that go on buried deep based on beliefs that we don't know about. We just assume people think like we do, and we assume people act the way, or are going to act the way we want to act. And it's cause for communication. It's cause to open up and say, well, this is how I do it, and this is why I do it that way. What about you? Is your way different? And how does that, and then sort that out. So that's going to lead us way closer to the joyful, carefree existence that we want, as opposed to suffering and seething with resentment and feeling, less than, and all of those kinds of things. So that's what I want to challenge you with this week, is to start examining your expectations and where they're causing you to suffer. Maybe you want to explore that a little bit further. You know this is possible because you are that magnificent. So I'll leave you with that for this week. Stay tuned for who knows what topic for next week. I promise it will be as fun and thought-provoking as I can possibly make it. Or it might be totally frivolous. Who knows? Anyway, if you like Tea with Sue, I'm enjoying getting comments from people, either verbally or written comments about the series. So if you like this series, please like it, subscribe, share with those that you feel might be of benefit. You can always find more on my YouTube channel if you've missed some episodes. In the meantime, we'll see you next Friday. Have a glorious weekend and enjoy every moment because you deserve it. You're magnificent. Thank you for being here.